That, let's look at the information we have. We have three products: frog, minnow, and worm. And we have also the fixed costs are $282,000 for the year. So take a look at the information that they give you, and basically you have these three products. So what you're going to do is set up the following. Oh, sorry. Okay, so this is the information we get from the problem. It tells us, so we're just setting it up in the format. So, for example, frog has $200,000 of sales. You can get that from the problem by noting that if you look at the first page of the problem, it tells you frog has 100,000 units. They expect to sell, and the selling price is $2 a unit. So that's where we're getting this information. Okay. 280, hopefully you can see that as well. So this information is the given information. So the variable expenses of 120, how do we get that? Anyone? How did you get 120 for a frog? Again, it's given information.
It's the $1.20 times the 100,000.
That's correct. So as I said, this is taking the given information and putting it into a spreadsheet type format. So we have now the total sales, the total variable cost, and the total contribution margin for these three products. And so when we set this up, and we can now use the weighted average information, which is basically the total information, is what this comes down to plug back into these formulas. So for example, but we're going to use the contribution margin ratio, not the contribution margin per unit, right? And the contribution margin ratio that we use for a multiple product firm is the weighted average contribution margin ratio for the whole firm, which is nothing more than the totals, using the totals in this example. So if you take the total contribution margin for the whole firm, and you divide it by the total sales for the whole firm, you get a weighted average contribution margin of about 40%. We can then plug this back into the formula, and since they're looking at break-even, what do we know about target profit in the case of break-even? It is equal to 0. So we can forget about this and just plug in fixed costs, which were given. And the fixed cost in this case is $282,000. So this is the amount of sales for the whole firm they need to break even. This is their break-even formula. Now I have a question. If the break-even is this amount, and this is going to be relevant to this problem, as you'll see, how much of the sales would be frog at the break-even point? How would you calculate that? So this answer is based on plugging in the formula using these numbers here, and we see that the break-even for the whole firm is $700,000 approximately. And just again, I may have jumped a step here. Are you all clear how we got this? So now my question is, how much of this is going to be frog, minnow, and worm? How would you calculate
Well,
that?
we need a little more information over here. We need to know the proportion of the fixed cost to allocate to each of those.
You have that.
Right, in the book, but he doesn't know how to calculate that. So
Okay.
that's what,
Now again, I'm moving you a little bit away from what this problem's asking you, but you'll see why in a minute. Anyone? I'd be impressed. Tell me how much of this amount is going to be the sales of frog, the sales of minnow, and the sales of worm. How would you calculate that?
So 28% is frog, 39% is minnow, and 33% is worm.
How did you come up with that?
Because I set it up. I set up the problem like it was set up in the slides, where the variable expense, when you, the frog, the 200,000 minus the 120,000, the 80,000 is 40% of the total, 290,000.
Okay, I'm gonna give you, since I'm asking sales, I'm gonna give you even an easier way.
Okay.
Take 200,000 over 720, that's the ratio of the break-even sales that goes to Frog. The ratio of the break-even sales that goes to Minnow is 280 over 720. And the ratio of the break-even sales that goes to Worm is 240 over 720. So in that way, you're actually determining the total sales for each product at the break-even point. Right, which is a natural question. I mean, you're looking not just the whole firm. We want to break it. We want to sort of take it back to the individual products. So that's how you do it. Clear, everybody? Hopefully, does that make sense? So just throw a number at me. 200 over 720. That gives me. And by the way, prove this to yourself. If I'm right, you can then calculate the contribution margin for each product, and it should ultimately give you break even. So for example, let's take a 5 minutes and do this. It might be instructive. So give me the break-even sales for each product. Go ahead.
Break-even unit?
So the first one, break-even in sales, dollars. So let me just write it out for you. So we have 700,000, 100. This is the overall break-even. Overall break-even in dollars. And we've got 3 products, right? We've got Frog, we've got Minnow, and we've got Worm. So give me the sales. This is sales. How much of the sales of this would go to Frog? It would be
196,000.
okay. This right. So it would be 200 over 720 times 700. This one would be 280 over 720 times 701. So just give me the dollar amounts and make sure we're all clear. How much is this?
196,028.
Okay. Minnow?
Hold on. $273,039.
273.
039.
Okay. And finally?
231033.
231033. Okay. So what should happen if this is correct is you should then take the contribution margin ratio for each product, calculate it, and then if you add up, find that the total contribution margin and break even for each of these products, it should equal the 282,000. So it's not, again, this is not what the problem's asked, but I'm showing you that this is a way to actually take it back to the individual products in the real world. Now, the way this problem is working, it doesn't tell you to do it that way, it tells you to do it a different way, and I'm going to explain which way is better. So this way is really the way that's more natural. So what's the contribution margin ratio for the first product? It's going to be 80 over 200. What is that? I'm having you do a lot of calculation here, but what's 80 over 200? That's the contribution margin ratio for Frog. 80 over 200.
40%.
What is it?
0.4.
Multiply 0.4 times this. What is it?
78411.2.
411.2. Okay. Multiply the contribution margin ratio times this, which is 120 over 280. So to calculate the contribution margin for Minnow, 120 over 280. What's that ratio? 0.42 times this number.
Actually, 1.43.
What is it?
No.
1.43.
Well,
Times 273.
039.
Is 117,406.77.
Okay, and finally, the last one, take 90 over 240, which is the contribution margin ratio for the worm. 90 over 240, which is what?
86637.
8.
6637.38.
Okay. So here's the contribution margins at break even for each of these three products. Now, if you add them up, I'm hoping you should be getting approximately 282,000.
282,455.
Yes, fine, that's fine. So the surrounding things here, but basically, this is the break-even sales for each product done in a traditional way. Not the way this problem is telling us to do it.
What are you supposed to get them equal when you add them all up?
This has to equal
The fixed expenses.
fixed expenses, the break-even, right?
This is what you get, 282,455.
Okay.
So it does, approximately. I mean, it's a little rounding. So again, this is not done in this problem, and so be it. What this problem is actually doing is telling you the incremental fixed cost for each of these products, and is asking you to calculate a break-even for that incremental fixed cost, ignoring all common fixed costs. So if you ignore all common fixed costs,
All common?
common meaning that are common to all three products. So if you just focus on the incremental fixed costs and calculate a break-even for this one, and this one separately based on those incremental fixed costs, if you add up all the break-evens in that process, you will not break even as a company, because you still don't have coverage over the common cost. This covers all the common costs, this approach that I'm using. All right, and that's really that's the solution that you're going to run into. You're going to see that if you show break-even for each product based on just incremental fixed costs, looking at the formula, you're not going to break even for the company. And so you'll see here as you go down the list that,
That's B.
yeah, this is part B.
Oh.
You calculate the break-even for each product, and what they did is use the formulas that we just used, but instead of using
Sorry, there was one above, right? 2A, not 2B. So there's one more. Yeah.
There we go. Yep. Thank you. So this is the break-even for each product using its incremental fixed cost. And again, you will fall short of the overall break-even goal of the firm. And that's what I guess, so it's not that that's a bad approach, it's just that it's not an approach, it forces you then to take another step. How do we cover our common costs at that point? And so the way to do it is go back to this way. This at least gives you a number that covers all costs, and that's the way that wasn't shown to you in the solution I wanted to show you. Okay, then we're done with break even. Feels like we did it a while ago, but
What's in B? What's supposed to be
B is
It's saying that you fall short.
Right, oh, okay.
that's what B showed. The B demonstrates that the break even for each product using its incremental cost is not going to give you an overall break even for the firm. You're going to fall short by, in this case, by 108,000 of the common fixed costs, because those are not in the calculations that you're doing.
Because contribution margin
Because
is
you've only-
only the variable.
Because you've only allocated part of your fixed
Part of-
cost
no,
to
they were
each.
giving them.
No, it's because you've only allocated, that's right, you're only,
The whole thing.
the question that you're being asked is, how much do I, product F, have to cover my incremental fixed cost, not ignoring the common costs of the firm? And so if you add up the incremental cost for each product, it does not equal the total fixed cost of 282,000. So therefore, the break even for these three products, based on their incremental fixed cost, has to fall short because it doesn't calculate, it doesn't take into account the common fixed cost, just the incremental. Okay, so that's the message of this problem. It's an interesting message because that's one way maybe firms would like to do it, but it fails to cover the entire fixed cost. Doing it this way here. Okay, all right, I'd like to move on now. Are there any other questions on this? So let's move on now finally to one problem I'd like to do in chapter 4. By the way, here we go, guys, thank you for column 2. These are high, here we go, this is for column 2. Let's just do exercise 4.8. Guys, take a few minutes if you haven't seen, if you haven't memorized the answer, and let's do exercise 4.8, and just to make sure you're sort of understanding how to do this job order costing thing.
Machine hours, overhead, how much they get manufactured for, okay, per hour.
Again, feel free to work together, guys. Exercise 4.8.
So it's 4 times 6. It's less hours. Yeah, yeah, this is less hours, though. Wait, what's this? Manufacturing. I know, so this is gonna be, we're not gonna multiply. But this number is in place, right, of this. So that's in place.
Guys, anyone, if you need help with a problem, feel free to raise your hand. I'll be happy to help you.
Because just think about it, like, forget it.
Guys, anyone in the back, feel free.
Forget it. If you said something was gonna cost more than it did, that means when you're tallying it out, it costs, it's all to take down. So it's-
Correct, but in this case, I said that it was less. I said 31, 33.
Joanna, can I ask, would you mind working with James as a,
Therefore, I didn't do
you
it.
guys?
I
Thank you.
didn't put into the, I didn't document it, that was wrong.
I mean, it costs us more than what? Oh, so yes, it's increase, so the
That's all, correct, and
so the
then
income's gonna go.
So, okay, the free shipping,
Next semester, we're gonna have to figure out a more dynamic approach, you know, to these off Sundays, you know, with which
I don't
one.
think we have me next semester anymore.
No, I'm saying we meaning they go to this.
We really enjoy your class, so maybe we could propose that as some other accounting class we do.
There are a lot of like teaching forums or
you multiply
like
the one.
whatever theories, like this is not like a new concept.
No, it's not.
There's actually a lot of data on this topic
Right.
about like what works, how much online.
See, my view is that accounting really works when you're interacting with students, because a lot of uncertainty, it helps when you're there because sometimes the questions aren't standard, so you can go to the whiteboard and really
That's a total.
start demonstrating something that hopefully makes the concept more clear, hopefully.
Right, the read.
But, which can be done, of course, if I have access to a whiteboard
Exactly.
and I've got a camera on me, it can simulate a class. I mean, there's no reason why I can't.
But then what's the point? You know?
But I prefer doing it in person. I think all of us prefer doing it in person. This was an attempt, I think, to expand the idea of last semester of instead of meeting every week, reduce so that you don't have to come in every week. I think that's the idea. But you know, you get to a point where diminishing returns. I think that's clearly not whatever we
Online
prefer.
class is spending so much time trying to like figure out the material. Then it's like, you're for 2 hours, and every night sit at the computer trying to like, whatever.
What courses now? You have other courses online? I think you
No,
have
the
that.
economics course is fully online, and that's really the main problem.
How's that going?
Terrible.
Wow.
Right, terribly?
Terribly would be an understatement to anything that's terrible, so, yeah.
I really think it would be honestly even more terrible, except
Listen.
that so much of it has been overlapped with your class that I think like we're conceptualizing it at least somewhat better because we're overlapping a bit the idea of like break even, average cost, fixed costs, like
Decrease.
Well, this course is, you know, is more of an applied course. You know, some would argue applied economics. You'll see that actually later when we get to chapter 7 in particular. It's a kind of a fun chapter. If you like puzzles, if you like solving puzzles. The key is that you're not puzzled at the end of it. You have to feel like you understand it.
I went to this amazing place in New Zealand called Puzzling World, and it's all about like tricks of the eye, physics, math.
You guys set? Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Guys in the back? Set? Working? You sure? Take your time. No, we have a few minutes. Don't rush. I mean, I'm more than happy to let you finish it and then we can go.
Oh my goodness, yeah, so they met it's so weird because this year, one of our friends named the kid, this guy's name, and then one kid also, so one of our friends named the kid Oscar. It was so random, 2 years ago. I mean, two friends
Did it get cold? Yes. Already said so.
What did I
What did I say?
And it's supposed to get cold. Yeah, look, tomorrow
Yeah.
high of
Yeah,
21
it's
degrees.
nice today, it's supposed to go back down to,
We
to
don't-
zero, you know, near zero
Shovel
tomorrow.
So,
We
But
have
I don't mind cold, as long as it's not
I
ice or
shoveled at
snow.
midnight last night.
Especially if you don't live in the city. It's, you know, I love snow growing up, I grew up in
I'm
the
not gonna
house.
have to salt it.
But unfortunately, now that I have a house out in the suburbs, it's torture. You have to constantly, you know,
Salt
Everybody
first.
says.
yeah, it is.
I don't know if I have salt left.
Kids
Oh,
asleep.
I read a, wait, my kids aren't home. I read a really cool trick, hold on, about salting, here. For icy steps and sidewalks and freezing temperatures, mix 1 teaspoon of Dawn dishwashing liquid, 1 tablespoon of rubbing alcohol, and half a gallon of hot or warm water. Pour over walkways, they won't refreeze, no more salt eating concrete or your sidewalks.
Ah. Of course, and you'll also have a very clean sidewalk. Dawn.
Right, Dawn, and alcohol.
That's right, you know, disinfected and clean. But what makes the dawn go away though? I mean, just because it's like,
I think it's-
like oil.
I think it's because, you know, that Dawn has that, you know,
Because you're putting
takes
water in it.
grease
You're putting,
away,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
That's,
So
that's,
it's-
And
15
alcohol
today.
doesn't, that's not, and alcohol doesn't really freeze, right?
no, it's not. I remember that. So
Thank you, absolute vodka.
where's that? Is that on the web? Obviously.
No, but I can send it to you.
Please. All right. Are you sure? All right. So this is a straightforward application of Chapter 4, really. You basically, first and foremost, have to calculate the infamous predetermined overhead rate, the one that I think there was some difficulty seeing that at the beginning. And but really what this is takes it back to really the beginning, Chapter 2. This is an application of using a mixed cost formula, which is basically costs, which we call y, equals a plus bx. Now in this case, so this would be costs. And in particular, this would be costs, this would be overhead costs. Equals a is the fixed cost. How much is the fixed cost in this case? Before the period, the estimate is?
50,000.
So A is the fixed cost. B is the variable cost per unit, which we see is, what is it in this case?
$4.
Yes. So it's plus $4 times X. Now X is plugged in at the beginning of the period.
150,000.
Right. We are told that they anticipate 150,000 hours at the beginning of this period for the upcoming period. So this gives us the expected overhead cost. I'll put it in E here. Expected overhead cost equals this. And the total is what? 4 times this is 600, so it looks like 1,350,000, right? And to convert into a predetermined overhead rate, what do you do?
Divided by the number of hours.
Right, so the predetermined overhead rate is going to be 1,350,000 divided by the number of expected hours in the period, which we just saw was 150. Is it machine hours, labor hours, was it? It can be either one, it can be,
Machine.
so this is machine hours. This gives me $9 per machine hour.